Just a quick reminder that I do now have a second podcast called Track Nerds, where I have guests on to discuss travel, exercise, and movies and TV. Check it out. And I apologize if my voice is a little fried in this episode and the next couple episodes from a cold I was dealing with at the time, but hopefully it's not too bad. Okay, enjoy the show. So, I'm afraid to ask, how did you feel about the movie Evita?
I didn't like it. It was a slog to get through, and it's not even like close to one of the longer movies. I mean, I think it was over 2 hours, but it felt like an eternity.
Yeah, in my notes, I kind of jot down during it. It's about a third of the way through my notes, I wrote, "Oh yeah, this kind of sucks," and then also, how is this Andrew Lloyd Webber? Because he's got a pretty good reputation, and this was almost uncomfortably bad.
Yes,
I think it's probably safe to say it's the worst movie on this list, and the only thing that was probably kind of close was the Kings of the Sun or something like that. And that I gave a little bit of a pass just because it was so old. You kind of give it the benefit of the doubt. This does not get that benefit of the doubt. Now, all that said, and well, we'll say more, but it, I do feel like it gave a decent overview of the history, and knowing nothing about Evita or this period of Argentina's history, and then doing the research, I do feel like it did illuminate some things and kind of did a decent job of giving an overview of the history, despite the fact that literally everything in this movie is sung. So like most musicals have a reprieve.
That was my thing. For sure, I agree about the historical accuracy, but yeah, I almost wish they just made it a regular. Like, there's no reason for this to be a musical.
There you go. that I think just sums it all up. And oh man, the one piece that is good, and of course it's the most famous one, where Madonna is singing the kind of iconic segment from it that they probably would use in every trailer and everything. And the only scene from the movie that I had seen, without having seen the movie. That little piece I think is solid. But even that whole song isn't good. Like, it's just, oh, man. Anyway, so this movie sucks. So we're going to stick to the history. Oh, of course, then even casting Madonna, and they have her playing her from age 15 until her death. And
which, I mean, in 1996, Madonna was obviously like, she's bankable at that point.
No, right, but she was, she was already older than the oldest they have. You know what I'm saying? Like, she was like 38, and Evita died at like 33, and they were playing her from like 16 to 33 as a 38-year-old, and she still does fine. And you're right, she was definitely bankable.
And with the makeup that they gave her, she looks like she's 100 at the end.
Right, Eva Peron was born in 1919, died in 1952, so she was 33. She had just turned 33 years old, and didn't look great. That aside, the movie does cover this woman, Eva Peron. It is kind of interesting because she was born into poverty, and it was just kind of an ambitious entertainer type who was kind of drawn to singing and acting. And in 1934, she moves to Buenos Aires to basically try to make it, like many young people do, and people who've done in this country for a long time, and we're familiar with it. And they kind of just, in the movie and in real life, she was basically just a social climber. So we even kind of see her in the movie sleeping with a photographer because she thinks that'll kind of help her make the next move up. And at a party, and again, just as happened in real life, she met the up-and-coming general, Juan Perón, and they immediately became a couple, like, right after they met. But again, it was just funny because he was this well-respected general, and she was the new hotness. And they're both kind of drawn to that. She was drawn to his kind of power and charisma, and he was drawn to her attractiveness. And at the same time, despite all that, it kind of makes her sound like a floozy. She was actually surprisingly competent in politics and in being this kind of face of the people, who, as they kind of saw her, because they saw her kind of go from nothing to become the first lady of Argentina when her husband eventually takes power. and they respected the heck out of her, and they still kind of hold her on a pedestal. So we're kind of knocking the movie and kind of maybe knocking how she got there. But once she kind of got to this position, she did a decent job with it, and the people seemed to really like her. And yes, the Perons had their detractors, but she was just insanely popular, and they kind of book in the movie that you kind of know. I mean, that she's gonna die within the movie at the beginning. Like they talk about the morning of her dying and the whole country kind of being sad, and then flashing back to the beginning and how her story got started. And we're kind of going all over the place, but that's kind of the gist of it. That basically is the whole story. Is poor young girl wants to make it big as an actress, kind of sucks as an actress, but is a good social climber, ends up attaching herself to the guy who becomes president. That's the story.
Yeah, well, but he becomes a leader of Argentina a couple times, right? Because he the first time is in a sort of a coup situation, and then he's ousted, and then he comes back and actually runs for office as the actual president.
Yes.
And I almost said prime minister, but it is president. Yeah, and then she's like a super popular first lady, and then wants to be the vice president of Argentina, which is like crazy to think of a husband and wife team being, president and vice president. It'd be insane. And she almost did it.
Yes. But one, she almost did and kind of just backed off because of her health, and she did ultimately die of cancer at the age of 33, and as she got sick, she kind of eschewed those political ambitions. But I don't know if you saw his, a couple of decades later, his third wife, because Eva was his second wife, his third wife did become the vice president and succeed him after his death.
Nice.
So they did it.
That's funny too, because that's a House of Cards storyline.
Yeah, and you didn't think about that being straight from the headlines of Argentina.
Right.
Yeah, they kind of show in the movie where he's on the outs. And again, that stuff I didn't follow as closely, and honestly, even in the research, it's just kind of the typical thing of differing political factions and powers at play. And so, yes, he was kind of on the outs, and then comes back and gets elected. And then actually, after Eva died, he got booted again, and they actually outlawed the Peronist Party that still exists in Argentina today. And then a couple decades later, he was able to come back, got reelected, and then his wife succeeded him. And again, this may not be a very long episode because there's not a whole lot to talk about. So I do want to talk about Peronism in general, because it does kind of have its own term here named after Juan Perón.
Is it like a political ideology?
Yes, and it's interesting because they kind of call it neither right wing nor left wing. They almost consider it like making a triangle, and it's kind of neither but both. And I don't exactly understand it, but they do. It kind of takes parts of the left and parts of the right, and kind of neglects or rejects the other. So it kind of, at the Wikipedia page here, it talks about how they don't like capitalism or communism, but they're definitely a populist type of thing. So they're definitely all about the people. They don't like the idea that there's a wealthy class, but they also don't necessarily stand up for the rights of the individuals. They kind of see the workers not as individuals who need to be taken care of, but the workers as a concept that needs to be elevated, but not in a communist kind of way. And they definitely are more conservative. So I don't know. They call it right-wing socialism. So I really don't have a better way to explain it than that. But it is a populist thing. The critics would call it kind of too authoritarian, and Perón was often compared to dictators. And here's a word I've heard a lot that I had to look up because I was kind of ashamed. I didn't know what it meant, but a demagogue or demagoguery. And you hear that term a lot. It sometimes applied to our current president as of time of recording.
Gotcha, everybody. This is actually a Donald Trump episode.
Oh, man. Yeah, so we were recording on December 21st. So, okay. Anyway, so a demagogue is someone who feeds on the emotions of the people that they're talking to and trying to persuade to their side, and doesn't necessarily back it up with facts or logic. So it's just kind of the raw that's very susceptible to any kind of intellectual criticism because it doesn't hold up under facts. So that's a demagogue. So Perón was accused by his detractors of being that. So he was insanely popular, but a lot of people kind of thought he was just kind of all talk and just saying what the people wanted to hear, and it helped keep him in power because he was popular. Basically, he was good at being popular, even if he wasn't good at being in charge. And so Peronism was actually outlawed for a while, but it is still the major party in Argentina. It's now actually called the Justicialist Party in Argentina now, but it is basically the descendant of Peronism. And where to say, yeah, when Peronists were allowed to run, 9 of the 12 presidents were elected from that party. There was also a period where the party was outlawed, so they're not counting that. But from 1946 to the present, when they've been allowed to run, they've won 9 of 12 presidential elections. So, of course, Peron himself was a few of those.
Yes, it sounds like Peronism is a kind of like almost socialism, but also kind of has a nationalism flavor to it.
Yes.
And very super like anti-imperialist, so like, very anti foreign intervention. It's kind of interesting to read about because it is kind of, not really, you can't really call it a communist ideology, but it's also definitely not capitalist because they're against
anybody getting rich, basically.
Against big corporations, right? Yeah. They're pro working class, pro union.
Yeah, so it is kind of its own unique thing. So yeah, again, as painful as it is to watch, it gets things mostly right, it seems. So like, there's a 1943 military coup. The fundraiser or whatever that they meet at was in real life as it is in the movie, kind of following an earthquake in San Juan. Again, San Juan, Argentina, not to be confused with San Juan, Puerto Rico. And yeah, Peron does in the movie gets arrested, and she kind of helps advocate for him.
Oh yeah, because he was it's been a couple weeks since I watched this, but he was in jail at one point. He was like actually in jail, and it was like, at least the movie made it seem this way. I don't know if it was the same in real life, but it was basically like because of her that he was eventually released. Like because of her, like stirring up the Peronism in the people. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so the public does turn him against them a little bit in the movie after there's a railroad strike and there's some arrests made. So again, that kind of probably ties into the authoritarianism. So yeah, the people like him, but he's also got to have a heavy hand to kind of maintain control. High unemployment was an issue. It wasn't all, roses for him, and again, she just kind of suddenly gets sick and dies. So again, I'm not even sure why they made this movie. And there's probably a way to tell a story. And historically, it is kind of neat that they did. I mean, he's the main historical figure. And yeah, she's significant. And it was kind of neat taking maybe not lesser because she's a woman, but lesser because she was just kind of the supporting character for her husband. Doing it from a different point of view as opposed to the main historical figure. I kind of like it when they do that. If you're going to tell Abraham Lincoln's story from his wife's point of view or something like that, is just kind of puts a different spin on it. And then for some reason you make it a musical with Madonna. Argentina itself, so kind of something we just kind of forget because we're kind of used to, we know America's history and we're a relatively young country, and you think about Europe being just, centuries old, or thousands of years old in many cases. And you forget that, like, that kind of newness of American history is also for all of the Americas. So Argentina is also young, and every big thing in the Americas. So like written history in Argentina didn't really exist before the Spanish came over and were exploring down there. They were just kind of a colony under the thumb of Spain, and of course then they start fighting and butting heads with them, and they did declare their independence from Spain in 1816 and had to actually fight them just like we did with the English before defeating the Spanish in 1824, and then against a long process. But today's Republic of Argentina was set up in the 1850s into the early 1860s. Man, is it bad? That's really all I have on this movie. Like, because it's a simple story that's only so long of a movie. It's only for movie because they add in all the singing and stuff. Like, the plot is that simple.
Right. I almost wish that this movie, because it is a good story.
Right.
I just almost wish that it was made not a musical so that they could explore some of the other stuff, maybe have scenes, more scenes with the working class people in Argentina, or more scenes of her the Rainbow Tour, her European trip, instead of just a song.
Oh, right.
And then it's oh, okay, well that's over with. Move on to the next song.
That was interesting when they showed her go over to Europe, and different countries had different receptions for her. So the more fascist countries, you could definitely see how he was a little more drawn to the fascist countries, and then some of the other countries, were kind of like, yeah, you need to get out of here.
It was 1947 was when she went on the tour.
Okay, so post World War II, right? So like Italy is like
post World War II.
Well, no, so don't they even meet Franco in Spain?
But I think it was. I think Spain was still all the way up until the 70s, right? Francoist Spain.
Which is why they got a good welcome in Spain, because they were kind of these light fascists in a way. But then Italy, who had just killed Mussolini, was like, you need to get the heck out of here. Right.
Yeah.
They could have also spent more time with her younger. They show the flashbacks to her being kind of young and poor. Like when they actually had an actress, not just Madonna playing her at age 15 or 16, but like a younger girl playing her when she was like, grade school age.
Oh, right, yeah.
And of course, I didn't see if that was actually accurate or not. The whole idea that she was kind of the part of the second family and kind of the bastard of her father who had this whole family. So like they show her father's funeral and she's not even allowed to go to her father's funeral. I don't know to what extent that was true.
According to the Wikipedia page, it is.
Okay, so yeah, they should have definitely dealt more with that. And again, cut the music altogether. Here we go. We're gonna remake Evita, and remake is a very loose word because the first thing we're gonna do is not call it Evita and not make it not make it a musical.
Right.
Maybe we could do a movie called Peron. It could definitely and do more about his background too, because we really didn't learn much about who he was other than a general. Like he was just a figurehead in the movie, and we really didn't know anything about his ambitions because all they do is sing, so you don't actually get to know anybody. And okay.
And it's like, God, the singing got so annoying too, because when it wasn't like an actual song, people were just singing lines that could have been spoken.
Pass the salt.
Yeah, it's like just say your lines in a sing-song voice. Oh,
right. Yeah. Right. The numbers were more tolerable. It was the in-between. They should have just been spoken. But they didn't have enough actual dialogue written to carry any story, so that would have been just as awkward in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie sucks.
Yeah.
So
for the listeners, they can skip this one.
Yeah. It's
not even a movie vegetable. Still listen to the podcast, though, to get the historical information, but you don't have to watch the movie.
Yeah, well, they've heard this is the end of the episode, Logan. I think if they haven't made it this far.
Well, you put that at the beginning.
Nope. Okay, so, yeah, short episode, and don't watch Evita, but, maybe browse some Wikipedia stuff. And next week, we will be doing a much better movie, also set in South America, with Motorcycle Diaries, starring Gal Garcia Bernal.